Thank you so much for tuning in these past few days for our World Day Against Trafficking panel. As I said before, we covered so much ground with survivors and advocates, Melanie Thompson and Christian Eduardo, that we decided to break up the video into 4 parts. You can watch the other 3 parts over the past few days on our channels, but part 4 starts now.
As we go into the final part of our panel discussion, we just wanted to bring attention to the fact that we are discussing some difficult and possibly triggering subjects. The goal here is to have an honest, thoughtful, and informative, worthwhile conversation. So let's end on part 4. But one thing I do want to address, because Saving Zoe portrayed a different type of sexual exploitation that we're used to seeing, something that we found when we showed the film to survivors who were so gracious and so wonderful and really basically informed our final edit of the film. One thing they said that we couldn't change because, you know, filming requires reshooting and all these things, but something that I do want to address is they said it was very unrealistic, the ending of the film, which at the end of the film, a character named Parker calls the police and they immediately show up and they help Laura's character Echo, and they arrest the perpetrators. And every survivor we spoke to along the way said that that was not their experience. The police didn't show up for them, and some even were victims of police brutality. And because we're having this conversation right now about reimagining police nationally, internationally, reimagining policies, reimagining laws, I really wanted to draw attention to this particular thing because it wasn't just one survivor who said this to us, it was multiple survivors. And I would love to hear both of your opinions on this.
That ending is very realistic for individuals that are white and live in certain area codes or zip codes. And I think that we need to pay attention to that. That I have many white survivor sisters who also have not experienced police being helpful or showing up quickly. But if you live in Scarsdale, Westchester, compared to Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, you're more likely to have either a neighborhood or community watch, or the police respond quicker because the area is quote unquote a good area. And I agree with the other survivors you guys have spoken to. The police did not show up that quickly for me. In my case, I have had many sex buyers that were police or off-duty detectives who would use their badge, and this is very common across many survivors' testimonies. But they use their badge as a way to bargain with you to have sex with them or go to jail. So they abuse that authority all the time. I definitely can attest to the police brutality piece of that. And I think that in my experience, I call them rookies, the uniform cops on the street, or those that are in like missing persons or not in a specific division per se, are the ones that I've had the most issues with. When I have found cops that were helpful in my situation, they were usually in either SVU or special crimes, something, or vice, either higher up on the police food chain or somebody that's specialized in trafficking. And even with that, I can speak only to New York. I honestly think that NYPD is lacking in training around this issue. And what I find, and this happens throughout society, we couple trafficking with other sexual violence issues. It's not to minimize somebody who was sexually assaulted on campus. This is not to minimize the Me Too movement. This is not to minimize any of that. But because of the financial piece and the economic piece of prostitution and exploitation, people tend to separate this. And because of that separation, we are treated differently. We're on the bottom of the totem pole here. We're not necessarily included in the Me Too movement. And the police look at us differently. They don't look at us as people that need help or saving. They look at us as dirt, scum of the earth. You chose this. This is what they want to do to make money. This, that, and the third. They don't take into account that oppression, that system of prostitution that is extremely targeting. They look at us as consenting adults that are making a really nasty or not socially accepted choice. And with that comes that stigma, comes that abuse of authority. Do this or you're gonna go to jail, or you're gonna suffer XY consequences. In the cases where police did show up, every time I've seen a cop show up out here for an issue like this, it was to do like a raid. So even that further perpetuated that trauma, busting down the door, putting in tear gas, arresting the person being exploited. So all of these things happen. I'm not going to say nobody that was ever trafficked ever had a good cop that helped them, but it's not the majority, and it's not common for most of us in the life.
Yes, it is so true. And I think so that the other component is that we have this tendency to think that police are like not connected with society. So survivors, when we are like trafficked, when we are on the life, like we experience the same racism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, the same, all those things that we experience from society, we experience them from police, because it's the same. Like if we don't educate like the police, the law enforcement, the task forces about like the system of prostitution that is entangled with sex trafficking and how this is rooted, as Melanie is saying, they are going to continue saying like, oh, you are an adult who are consenting to do this because it was your choice. And that is not true. Like, I would say like more than 95% of the times, if it's not higher. And I think so that we need to start like talking about this, like how police is continue like traumatizing like survivors, how as a society we continue blaming the victims, how as a society we continue blaming the people who are being bought and sold, and we don't see beyond that. We're always saying like, oh, but they are choosing to do that. Well, yes, in a world where I'm going to be stigmatized, criminalized, when a world where nobody wants to help me, well, what else do I have? Is that really a choice? If I really want to give access to people? And on top of that, like, in which society we are living that we are like shielding buyers? Like buyers are raping people. Buyers are raping people, and that is the truth. Like, and I know that it is hard because most of us, we know buyers, and we have heard our friends that going for some chicks, or maybe like just playing or fooling around, but we are perpetuating the system of prostitution, and we need to acknowledge our privilege. Police need to acknowledge their privilege. If we want to change the criminal system, we need to acknowledge all this and how our criminal system, our police, our society is still rooted in that. And we are continuing perpetuating all this cycle of violence, sexual exploitation, of poverty, of discrimination, transphobia, xenophobia, and all these things that even if we think like, oh, it's not affecting me, but well, we are creating all those systems where people like traffickers and perpetrators are abusing people because we are part of all that.
I'm so happy you brought up buyers, because I do think we should discuss that. And I know we have spoken about it, about how there's stigma on the people who are, giving their bodies, but there's not stigma on the buyers. There's stigma of traffickers, and we talk about that, of course, but the buyers are who are fueling the industry. And I think it's very, very frustrating that we don't talk about buyers enough. We don't talk about the idea that there's a wide range of buyers that comes from even bachelorette parties. Why do you think we don't talk about buyers and have more stigma around buyers?
I don't know the actual answer to this question. I have many theories. One of them being that, for the most part, no offense, Christian, the majority of individuals who are targeted in prostitution are Black and brown women and girls. Two categories of people that society systemically doesn't care about: women and Black people, Black and brown folks. And because the majority of the people in prostitution are Black and brown, are women and girls, and women are already looked at as inferior and second class in society, Black people even less than. When it comes down to the buyer, which are disproportionately well over 80% white middle-aged men with disposable income and a higher education degree, you're looking at these people as prestigious and us as we deserve this, or she brought that on herself, or they're the ones that made this choice. Why did she do that? And I don't know why people, to me, it's common sense. Nobody's asking, what is he doing? Why is he pulling out his wallet? Why do you think this is okay? To the point where, I've been in debates with people about this topic who try to sympathize with the sex buyer. Oh, well, he was lonely. Oh, well, he's disabled. Oh, well, that does not justify, nothing justifies the purchasing of sexual access to anybody's body. People say, well, oh, well, what if they have a disability and nobody wants them? Find somebody, masturbate, but do not buy or that. To me, the fact that like that sentence doesn't creep people out is really frustrating to me. Purchasing a human, this goes all the way back to slavery. Like, this is not okay. And the fact that people are questioning sex work or questioning our what the legal framework that I support, the fact that we're trying to make justifications and sympathize with people buying other people is ridiculous to me. The other one of my other theories is that a lot of the buyers are people with positions of authority. So because many sex buyers are doctors, lawyers, judges, teachers, police officers, politicians, you're not going to jump on the stigma and put them out there and make them look bad because they're prestigious in society. And they're not the ones that's on the street being naked. They're not the ones that's selling themselves. They're doing good work. They're the good people in the community. And because of that, and that coupled with the fact that they have resources to cover up whatever they want, all negative signs point to us. All negative signs point to the person that's already helpless. All signs point to the person who has a lack of choices and is doing this to survive, or has a lack of choices and it was put into prostitution. So it's easier, like I was saying earlier, how it's easier to accept the happy narrative of sex work and not the negative narrative and the bad narrative of the trafficking victim. It's also easier to place the blame of prostitution on the person who is deemed bad in society, as opposed to actually stepping out of your comfort zone and saying, you have a great job and you do good for society, but you're making a wrong decision. And people don't want to do that because it's easier to just add negative onto the list of the person that has the most negative, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Yes, it is so. It is so true, and I think so that we can't forget that we are living in a patriarchal system. Like, our society is a patriarchy. So how are we going to stigmatize the buyers if the buyers mostly are males? Like, we cannot, and we cannot lose. We need to keep track on that for real, because as Melanie was saying, like, most of the people and communities impacted by prostitution, sex trafficking, or commercial sexual exploitation are the communities more vulnerable. But the ones who are giving the money are the ones who are in top. Like, so that's why I think so. And the other thing is that machismo is here. I'm from Mexico. Machismo is like in our culture is so ingrained. But what I have seen here is that also machismo is in every single male and human being in the world, for real. Like, we have this idea that males, and even if it's 2020, we continue having this idea that males are more than women, that males can achieve more than women. And why? Males are still earning more, like, males are still have disposable income, males still have like higher in hierarchy in all organizations, in all these things. Like, yes, there are a couple of women who are going out there and like being successful, but to be honest, that is not enough for me, because we are continuing like perpetuating this idea that males are the best, males can do whatever they want because they are the ones in power, because they are the ones in control, and that includes accessing someone else's body. Okay, because I have the money, because I have the power, because I have the control, I have the right to access people's body. And that is not okay. And that is happening, and that is not okay. And because it's happening, that doesn't mean that it's okay. Because what we are doing is perpetuating and romanticizing this. Like, oh, yes, why don't we engage in prostitution at least? It's not rape. It's something that you decide. Well, let me tell you, like, or just things like the first time is going to be the difficult one. Well, yes, until you learn how to disassociate, until you learn how to survive. Like, yes, because literally you are being raped. When people are selling their body, and again, it's not like people just wake up with this idea that, oh, today I'm going to get a coffee, and you know what? I'm going to engage in the sex trade. Like, why not? Why not? And if you're doing this means, if you wake up with this idea, this means that you have so much privilege that you can go into a system that is underground already, because people are saying like, oh, prostitution is not underground. Like, we need to make it safe. Like, it's violence in there. There is rape, murder. Like, there is a lot of things out there. So if you wake up one day and say like, oh, you know what? I want to engage on the sex trade. Oh, you have the privilege to go down there and to escape, like, without any consequence, without any harm. But not everybody who is under prostitution, most of the people who are in prostitution, we weren't there like, oh, I'm so happy to be here and I feel so empowered that random people are accessing my body and I'm just have a plate of food while they are having disposable income, like, to come and access my body. Like, right? Okay, well, wow, how equity, how equal this world is with me. Like, I'm going to continue this like 20 years. Like, for real, like, prostitution is so rooted on racism about the way you look, the size of your body, the size of certain parts of your body, how we are like, oh, the more virgin you look like, the more price you can have, like how exotic you are, like all these things. And we want to protect the buyers. We want to protect these people who are preying upon these people that they know already that they are in need. And one other issue with prostitution and with buyers know who to buy, okay? And the thing is that even if people are saying, I'm doing this by choice, remember, there is always going to be somebody who's going to be more vulnerable, more in need. And sadly, that person is going to say yes. Because if they don't say yes, probably they are going to die. Probably they are going to not have food or something else that they really need. That's why we need to have this straightforward conversation and say like, no, we need to stop buying bodies. Like, how crazy is that? Like, for real, how crazy is that? Like, and a lot of people are saying like, but people are surviving. Yes, but in the words of Audre Lorde, we were never meant to survive. We are not just here in this world as human beings, just like, oh, covering my basic needs like food, housing, and that's all. Like, I don't need, we are here like a human being with goals, with dreams, you know? And how we can tell these people like, you are not more than your body. You are not more than a whole. You are not more than just a certain leg of your body, you know? And that is the saddest part, like how we are dehumanizing ourselves, we are dehumanizing this activity, how we are like, it's crazy for me, it's crazy for real, like how we want to normalize the purchasing of bodies, like,
of humans.
Like, yes, of human. It's so crazy. It's, yes, like no, like this is going to affect not only us, like our future generations, like our kids, like the future generations are going to grow up thinking like, oh, if somebody wants to access my body, they just need to pay, like, and that's okay. Like, well, that's not okay because you're not consenting. Like, just because you're receiving something in exchange, that doesn't mean that you're consenting. Because you consent one time, that doesn't mean that you're consenting after that one time. Like, do you understand like how crazy? And prostitution is not an isolated activity. It's a system. It's a system of prostitution, for real. And that is the reality. And go and ask survivors, believe in survivors. And we don't want people go in hell like we were, for real. It's not easy. A lot of us didn't made it. A lot of us are dead. We don't even know where they are. People are not looking for them. We are not searching for them. Like the ones who have escaped that, we are living with life-term consequences, and it's not easy. So for real, trust us when we are telling you about how prostitution and human trafficking is.
And one last thing that on the buyers know that you're not enjoying the sex with them. So going back to Christian's point about that waking up with that privilege, they know that if the money wasn't involved, they would otherwise not be able to get you. So to prevent, right, like in their minds, if they put money on the table, they're not raping you. Well, she wants it now because there's $100 on the table. No. That's not how this works. I'm poor. You have $100. I don't have a place to sleep. this is a hotel for the night. Or I have a pimp who's requiring a quota. This is how I don't get how I don't get beaten today. Or this allows me to shower for the night. So sex buyers, I've had sex buyers tell me, you're not enjoying this. Or the opposite, you know you like it. They're the ones that dictate what happens in that room. They're the ones that make that control. And granted, traffickers have control of the system. They control who you see, when you see them, how much you must make. But it's the sex buyers who have that control when you're in those rooms, in those cars, in those staircases. They're the ones that dictate that for you. And we're not shedding enough light on them. We're trying to sympathize with them. The fact that people are pushing for full decriminalization, at least in New York, of prostitution is giving them anonymity, is giving them immunity, is saying that this is okay. It's okay to keep on purchasing people or paying people to rape them. It's okay to do that. And we're not shedding enough light on the demand.
Yeah, and they fuel the industry. I mean, we started this conversation saying it's a $99 billion industry, and who's fueling it? It's the buyers, yeah.
Mm-hmm. As we're having this, national, global conversation, reimagining law enforcement, reimagining laws, reimagining policies, us feeling that is extremely important that survivors are in part of the conversation because firsthand experience will help us understand it, and therefore we will be able to combat it. Obviously, as you guys have spoken about, this is heavily debated. It sometimes is a controversial topic, but that doesn't matter. We should be having the conversation. And just having the conversation doesn't mean that things are going to change overnight. It's going to take tireless work. It's going to take tireless advocacy. And both of you, I think, are tremendous examples of that. And so I'd love for you to share with us some of what you have been doing, the work that you've been doing as advocates.
We've done
yes, well, yes. But I would like, especially now that we're having this conversation about buyers, traffickers, people who are being bought and sold, we are I personally am supporting and looking forward for a legislation, a law, a model called the equality model that actually looks for stop criminalizing, stop the stigma, stop the discrimination towards the people who are with bought and sold, the people who, it doesn't matter how you call yourself, like a prostitute, that you're in the life, that you are being trafficked, it doesn't matter, but we need to stop criminalizing them because they are surviving, because the lack of choices, because they are on our opportunities, because they are vulnerable, there are people exploiting them. That's why we need to decriminalize this part. But as we were talking about buyers, and now that we have create awareness about how it's so important to maintain accountability on buyers, well, as buyers have certain guilt while they're feeling this system, we need to criminalize brothel owners, people who are promoting prostitution, traffickers, and of course buyers, because the money is coming from them. And because even that, buyers need to understand that even if they don't want to acknowledge the harm that they are doing, they are feeling a system that it's because we don't have enough bodies for you buyers, we need to traffic more people. And that is the thing. And buyers for real, need to understand this thing. That's why we need to maintain a common. It's not that you are buying I don't know, things, you're buying and accessing people's bodies. That's why we need to maintain you accountable, because you're harming people, you're raping people, because these people are going to have consequences the rest of their lives, because even if you don't want to take agency and to acknowledge that you're privileged and that you have disposable income, it doesn't matter your race, your gender, you're a buyer and you're feeling a higher system. The other part is the part that we are doing right now, talking about the realities about sex trafficking, prostitution, exploitation, buyers, and all the components around that. And the third and the fourth part is creating exit strategies. Because we know that people are surviving. We know that there are a lot of people who are vulnerable and they don't have the skill, they don't have the tools to stop engaging on the sex trade. We need to create tools for them. We need to create a way so they can trust, they can have a support system, and they can receive holistic services. mental health, like medical, legal, like all the services that they want, because we deserve it, because this is a system that is exploiting people. This is a system that is exploiting the vulnerabilities of people. So we need to counter that part. We need to create a system that is really, really supporting survivor. And even if you don't call yourself as a survivor, like even coming out of your experience, you need support. You need support because the sexual component, the mental health component, the economical component, there are so many things in this part of exploitation of prostitution that are so harmful for human beings, that are so harmful for everybody, that you can, it's not, as Melanie was saying, it's not that you are going to come out and it's like, okay, go for your own. No, there are a lot of things to do, and people cannot do this by ourselves, because the same system as prostitution exists as a system because as a society we are perpetuating this. Okay, we need now to create a system that counterattack this thing, and to really, really understand that prostitution is a system, and that people are profiting from them. People are profiting from the harm of other people, are profiting for raping other people, and people are profiting for other people's bodies.
Yeah, all of what Christian said. Honestly, I've in my entire advocacy career, I've done a lot of me in my personal capacity trying to work with as many survivors as I can, trying to get them off of the street, taking mentees and sharing my experience, but more on a professional level, just doing a lot of lobbying, working on the legal side, trying to pass some laws. Some of the things that I've worked on are laws like FOSTA SESTA, the TVPJA, which is the Trafficking Victims Protection and Justice Act, the Women's Equality Model, the Women's Equality Act of 2012. So there's a couple of things that I've been working on in terms of like lobbying and legal stuff. Currently, like Christian said, we are advocating for the equality model. So that's our next big push. But doing this, having media interviews, educating the public on the realities and debunking the sex work myths, and really just talking a lot about that, and really explaining to people that lack of resources and lack of money and all of these things and systemic oppression doesn't equal consent. And I think that's really what my biggest goal is now, because people are really confused and think that if somebody is doing something on their own accord because they need something, that it's consent, and it's not. So that's really what I advocate for the most and push for.
You guys are amazing. Oh my goodness. I truly, truly appreciate you guys taking the time to be here and talk with us and talk to everyone. I know that Vanessa wants to talk about some resources that she's looked up. But for anyone else watching as well, who want to help their community, who want to help maybe lobby different laws or policies, what advice would you give them?
So in terms of policies, you can definitely check out equalitymodel.ny.org. That's the website that's the fastest to access in terms of learning information about the equality model, also known as the Nordic model, and learning about what we're actually supporting. Also, you can memorize like all of the hotline numbers. I'm not necessarily a fan of hotlines, but if you are absolutely clueless and don't know what to do, there is a human trafficking hotline number that you can call. So that's definitely one or two things. But educate yourself, check out the website, and then learn more about what's going on in your state or in your city or country, and what your trafficking laws are like in your area.
Yes, I will say the same, like educate yourself, and also for if people who are watching this are from different part of the world, like engage with the organization that are doing human trafficking, because human trafficking is happening more often than you will think, especially when you start like digging out and like doing research, and you will be surprised about how human trafficking is even happening. And again, remember, it can happen to everyone, everywhere, and it's happening right now. So that it would be great if you can join, like educate yourself, listen to survivors. I think so that also Vanessa and Laura are going to share like our social media and all these things. We are constantly like putting things around, like educating about these things. And remember that we are sharing all this with you because we want to educate you. And at the same time, we feel that we need to protect those people who are there vulnerable. those people who cannot raise their voices, those people, those survivors who have been silencing for years because of so many things, because they don't want to be like, again, revisiting their stories. But for real, like, educate yourself, believe in survivors, and support the equality model.
Awesome. Yes, we'll definitely be tagging you guys in this video. We're also going to put your Instagram handles as well in the comments. Something we'll also be listing in the comments is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which Melanie mentioned. They have a phone number, a text number, an online tip form, a chat. RAINN, which is spelled RAINN, has a number and a live chat. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, obviously they focus more on children and teens, but they have great resources on internet safety. And they have information about removing pictures that were put up without your consent. They also run a cyber tip line for reporting the trafficking and exploiting of minors and sexual abuse materials. And there's also StopSextortion.com, where you can find advice, tips, as well as a number to text for help. These are just a few resources. I think what both of you said about continuing to educate yourself, continuing to look up stuff that's in your area is super important. And if someone watching this has experienced trafficking or exploitation, I hope that this conversation has been able to help in some way. And thank you guys again, really, for sharing your stories, really for advocating. Like I said, you know, it's a conversation, and I'm so thrilled that you agreed to be part of this conversation.
So
oh,
great.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for having us, for real. And I just say, Vanessa, I just want to take a moment for if you have experienced sex trafficking, if you're experiencing sex trafficking or prostitution and you don't want to be there, there are resources out there. You are not alone. There are people who are not going to judge you. There are people who are not going to stigmatize you. It doesn't matter how you look, how you express yourself, how you identify yourself. Like, that's why we are talking about this, because we don't want other survivors, other victims to feel alone. There's resources out there. Like, look for them. Don't lose the hope. For real, like if we do something, like every single person, if we help one each other, like, things are going to change. Things are going to change, and things are going to get better.
I really appreciate you saying that. Melanie, is there any one last thoughts or any last thing you want to impart on anyone watching, be it they're being trafficked, or if they have never known anything about trafficking before, just anyone who's watching?
So for individuals who have never heard of trafficking or are on the fence about the consensual sex work narrative, I just want to say, do more research on that. Again, like Christian said, I would never put a label on somebody that doesn't want to accept it. But a lot of the times, people who are advocating for consensual sex workers are usually people who have experienced a lot of trauma in their previous life or years before they came to that narrative. So do research on that. For anybody who is a victim of trafficking currently, or knows someone that's a victim of trafficking, or you just recently exited, like Christian said, you're not alone. Do know that it's never your fault. Asking why me is only going to torture yourself. And it's always, the perpetrator always does this, not because of you and who you are, but because they have their own hidden agendas. And I think that it's really, really important to emphasize that. Know that you are not abnormal or crazy or nasty or stupid. There are so many people out here that have experienced that, even though it feels like you're in a world by yourself. So just, reach out, just find who to reach out to. And you just have to find your people, and that's all.
Thank you both so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to everybody who submitted questions for this conversation. We weren't able to get to all the questions, but you both did an amazing job of actually answering a lot of questions before we even asked them. And thank you guys for watching. So let's continue to have conversations. Let's continue to spread awareness, and let's encourage change for the better.
Thank you.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed all 4 parts of our World Day Against Trafficking panel, which turned into a Weekend Against Trafficking panel. Hopefully you guys took something away from the conversation, and let's just keep talking.